most of the experiments that you're going to do are going to fail. That failure really teaches you resilience, and it teaches you that grit, and it really tests your motivation, right? Like this experiment has failed 6 times, but yet I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to do it again.
Welcome to Learning from Leaders, a podcast from Southwestern Medical Foundation where we dive into a world of wisdom, mentorship, and innovation, exploring the insights and life lessons of seasoned community and business leaders. I'm Michael McMahon, President and CEO of Southwestern Medical Foundation. I invite you to subscribe now and join us on this empowering journey of growth and leadership. Now, let's learn from the best and drive meaningful change together.
Welcome to Learning from Leaders, the podcast where we explore how community leaders are creating impact and inspiring others. Today, we're talking about what it actually takes to build a biotech ecosystem, going beyond great science and uncovering the infrastructure, the partnerships, and the leadership that help startups move from idea to impact. Our guest today is Dr. Gabby Everett, the Director of Business Operations and Strategy and the site head at BioLabs Pegasus Park, a shared lab and office space designed to help life science startups grow with the resources and community that they need. Gabby, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So to kick us off, can you just tell us a little bit about what BioLabs is and what its mission is, and tell us a little about your role there?
Sure, absolutely. So BioLabs is a global network of shared office and lab space, co-working environment, but for science. So half of the lab is wet lab space, where our scientists, our researchers do their experiments, and then the other half is office space. And what's cool about BioLabs is that it's more than infrastructure. It's more than lab space. It's a community. So right now in our space in Dallas, we're hosting about 20 biotech companies. We call them our residents. So they're with us. And it's just this really beautiful, dynamic community of researchers doing everything from cancer therapeutics, neurodegenerative, all the way up to wearable medical devices and everything in between. So the casual collisions and the conversations that happen within BioLabs is what makes it a special place. As Director of Business Ops and Strategy, my role is multifaceted. One of my roles is to identify these early stage life sciences companies from all across the North Texas region and beyond, who would benefit from being in a co-working space like BioLabs, recruit those companies into our community. The next thing I do is to help the companies that we have currently. Our companies have needs, they have personnel needs, they need recruiters, they need people who can advise on regulatory, on CMC, on every aspect of everything on the pharmaceutical timeline. So helping them connect to those resources. If they need a certain piece of equipment or access to a certain piece of equipment, it's my job to help them find that access and get that piece of equipment. And then the third thing that I do, probably I would say one of the funnest parts of my job, is really this idea of ecosystem building, right? You mentioned ecosystem, and it's really, you go back to early nerdy days of biology in which an ecosystem is this community of its network, right? And if one aspect of that community and one piece of that network falls out, the entire community crumbles. It's really the same way in biotech. It's impossible to do it in a vacuum. So building that community, building the infrastructure and the partners around our companies is another cool thing that I get to do. Ultimately, I would say that our goal is to help our researchers and their companies survive this, valley of death that people hear about, those very early stages of discovery, help them survive long enough to where their science matters.
Yeah, and you can relate to that so much because you have spent part of your career as a scientist. So can you talk about that a little bit and what that journey was into more of like the business ecosystem operating part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely started out as, I'm still a nerdy scientist. I've got my signature DNA earrings. I started out at the bench, did graduate school, got a PhD in biochemistry at Texas A&M. My goal and my research was to basically kill every bacterial cell that I could possibly find. And it was very personal for me. My Grammy got antibiotic-resistant staph infection in the hospital. It nearly killed her. So my research was my personal vendetta and crusade again, trying to kill the little jerks that tried to take out my grandmother. So after that, after graduate school, I went into industry, joined a global life sciences company doing industrial research, microbiology research. I was there for about 6 years. And during that time, I got to wear multiple hats. I was, did from cradle all the way to post-commercialization support, in that I came up with the research ideas. I tinkered in the lab. I worked with our sales force and our customers to find out what needs they needed to fill. I did budgets. I led teams. I wrote patents. I worked with our sales team about what they can say out in the field and how they can talk about these complex products that we were innovating and put them into layman's terms for their customers. Also got to work with marketing teams of like, hey, Gabby, can we say this on the label? Well, no, not unless you want to get sued, So I really got to wear multiple hats, and it was almost like being in a startup, the biotech group, and a large chemical company. And around, again, 6 years in, I found this role at BioLabs, and it was really kind of the mixture of science and communication, because again, you have to work outwardly with the ecosystem, you have to work inwardly with your companies. And BioLabs was in the middle of this Venn diagram that included science, comms, and also serving the community. So I read the job description, and the first line was, "We empower scientists." So I was like, where do I start?
Well, that defines you perfectly. Do you miss being a scientist and being like truly at the bench all the time at all?
I don't. That's a really great question. I figured that out maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. There was a moment in the lab where I was helping out one of our research scientists, and it dawned on me. I was like, wow, I don't necessarily miss being at the bench. I don't have to miss the science because I am ingrained in the science every day. When you're doing your PhD and when you're working in a lab, you're very myopic and you're focused very much on your specific research. But I'm an all over science nerd. So now my job is to understand everybody's research. So in honesty, I have never felt closer to the science than where I do now.
Yeah. I love that. So because you've kind of had your hands on all of these different pieces, I would imagine that that has served kind of how you're able to lead the BioLabs team and to be able to be a resource and a cheerleader to your member companies. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what elements from your life at the bench has really kind of translated into your leadership at BioLabs?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. Science, as you know, is very trial and error. Most of the experiments that you're going to do are going to fail. And the important part is that you learn from that failure, right? It's cliche, but you learn more typically from a failed experiment than you do from a successful one. That failure really teaches you resilience, and it teaches you that grit, and it really tests your motivation. Right? Like this experiment has failed 6 times, but yet I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to do it again. Right? So you learn again that resiliency, the ability to bounce back. Another thing that you learn is definitely ownership of your mistakes. Right? Sometimes your research, your experiment fails because of something that you did. You're talking to your lab mates, you're talking to your PI, and I forgot to add this one element, or I did it the wrong way. So being able to own up to your mistakes is very key. But in order to own up to your mistakes and feel comfortable admitting them, your leader needs to be approachable, needs to be authentic. You have to be able to create that kind of mental safety, that emotional safety with your team to be able to admit those mistakes.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, making it an environment where it's not just admitting them, but like really seeing them as a valuable experience that can be useful going forward.
Right.
So I think in your role, you've been so obviously incredible and had brought so much energy to leading these 20 plus companies that are in the biolab space and being a resource and a cheerleader for them. But you also have been a huge cheerleader for this broader ecosystem and broader biotech community in the DFW area. Can you talk about like what does that really look like in practice to kind of be a leader really trying to grow this industry in a place like Dallas?
It's so I love that question because it's two different styles, right? Leading a team is very operational. It's very execution. It's let's make the day to day less chaotic. Let's make it manageable. It's about setting clear expectations and having shared goals moving forward. However, on the ecosystem side, it's very much alignment, right?
Yeah.
It's getting all of the pieces together again, building that ecosystem, building that community, and making sure that everybody in that ecosystem has the ability to interact with all of those different pieces. So it's leadership without taking ownership or having control over it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And of course, it's really hard to build a biotech company, whether it's capital intensive, it's a really nuanced industry with a lot of regulatory considerations, like raising capital, all of these things. Um, what do you think, like, whether at BioLabs, which we can get into later, but also just like building this ecosystem in general, like, what do you think lays the groundwork to make sure that more people with big biotech ideas feel like they have the groundwork needed to be successful and scale?
Exactly. Collaboration is absolutely key. I think that's one of the outstanding features that this ecosystem has is that whether you're in Fort Worth working on a medical device or a wearable medical device or something in sports tech in Frisco, or if you're working in therapeutics at UT Southwestern, these communities come together and they collaborate with each other. And it's very interesting because innovation happens at those intersections. You know, you have biology mixed with chemistry to make biochemistry, and you have biology and physics and biophysics and astrophysics and paleobotany, right? Like you have all these complex sciences that come together and innovate at those intersections. And I feel like BioLabs enables those interactions. And with that collaboration comes closeness, comes trust, comes more collaboration. So it's just this great thing that's feeding off of each other. And everyone is committed in our ecosystem. And we all have that same shared goal. And because of that, ecosystem is less of this thing that we're building, and it's more of a verb. And
Totally.
It's something that we're all doing, and we're all doing it together.
Yeah. And I'd love to get into how BioLabs has done. It's such a lofty mission and goal. And personally, having spent a lot of time there and having the pleasure of getting to work with you on it, Gabby, it's been really exciting to see how much has happened just in the last 3-4 years since it's opened. I guess coming up on the 4-year anniversary.
4-year anniversary, March.
So, and I think, I'd love to hear from you, like, first of all, how are you kind of defining success? What has growth in BioLabs looked like over the last few years? And also, like, BioLabs kind of came to fruition in Dallas at an interesting time where we had, a lot of groundwork built from having the incredible UT Southwestern right down the street and kind of all of these resources here. Like, what was BioLabs able to offer at that moment in time? Like March 2022 when it opened.
Yeah, absolutely. BioLabs was really, I would say, the missing piece of the ecosystem. As you mentioned, we have these powerhouse universities that are producing incredible intellectual property and is churning out and spinning out this incredible technology. You have those same universities churning out fantastic talent, right? Like we are the #1 tech workforce in the country for a reason, and it's because you have these institutions making these STEM graduates. You have groups like BioNorth Texas that are that kind of trade org side that is the holding place for industry needs and those regulatory consultants and advisors and mentors. You have a group of sophisticated investors in biotech. The piece that was missing was the infrastructure. And to talk about how far we've come in the past 4 years compared to where we thought we were going to be, we originally thought when we started this facility that, okay, 1 year in, if we have 5 companies, if we're 25% 30 occupied, that's what success looks like.
Right.
And instead, 1 year in, we had close to 20 companies and we were 75 to 80% occupied. Yeah. So it was just this rapid growth. And I think what that rapid growth represents is the fact that biotech was already here.
Yeah.
It was already churning and it was already strong in the North Texas region. We just didn't have the platform to actualize it here. So what ended up happening is that those companies that were coming out of UT Southwestern, if they wanted to find affordable lab space where they could fail quickly and cheaply and de-risk their science, they had to go someplace else.
Yeah.
So we've been able to capture those companies and keep them here. So if you build it, they will stay. But what it's turned into is if you build it, they will come to you, right? So a lot of our growth was from companies that weren't even from North Texas. They were from Boston, New York, technology from Maryland, Arizona, California. We're even an international campus at Pegasus Park now with Universal Diagnostics from Spain. You know, these companies came to us, and a lot of them was because they saw the great business climate in Texas, or maybe they had partnerships or doing clinical trials at UT Southwestern. So they formed a lab here. Some of them were basically boomerangs where they did their PhDs at UT Southwestern, moved to California, did graduate work, started a company, and then went, I can go back home and bring my company with me and join this dynamic growing ecosystem. So it's been very exciting to be a part of. And that growth also triggered our newer lab space, which is Bridge Labs. So BioLabs is 32,000 square feet. Bridge Labs is 135,000 square feet. And it's that what's next of lab space.
Yeah. And for listeners who might not be as familiar as you are with like what the growth trajectory of some of these companies looks like, can you talk about, because you're doing so much work, obviously leading BioLabs, but also have taken on leading a lot of the work at Bridge Labs. Can you talk about like, you know, what stage is a company when they're typically coming into BioLabs? Like, do they have 3 people there? Do they have 10 people there? And at what point are you kind of like, how are you building the pipeline of like, okay, that's when, you know, you're ready to go on to this kind of graduation lab space? Like, how do you help coach companies, or what have you seen around their growth trajectory and making sure that they have like the resources that they need, to your point, to continue to stay?
Right, exactly. So the ideal company, I would say, for BioLabs is one of these early stage companies. So maybe there are companies that are spinning out of the university, maybe they're independent startups, but they're at that early stage where they're the most fragile. And what I mean by that is that their science is very risky, right? It's untested technology. You may not understand the mode of action of a particular molecule in cancer. And because of that risk, you're too risky for standard investors, right? They want to be able to invest millions of dollars in a technology that is more proven, especially in, you know, current funding environments. That level of risk is very difficult. So we are great for companies early at that stage and great for companies as they grow. Early stage companies, typically they're grant funded. As they get grants, they're able to reach more milestones that make them attractive to venture capital, to those early seed rounds. But they're still not big enough to the point where they can afford that expensive equipment, or they don't want to lease that lab space for 2 years, right? They're still, again, in that very fragile point where flexibility is key.
Yeah.
So those are like the ideal places or companies for BioLabs. And as those companies grow, we have single bench companies that are 1, 6-foot lab bench, The CEO is the lead researcher, is the lab tech.
Yeah.
And then we also have companies that are in maybe 3 to 4 benches. And then once they get more funding, they hop into a private lab. They buy their own large workhorse, pieces of equipment. And then after that, they grow into even yet larger lab space. But once they get to the point where they're at that higher level of funding, Series A, Series B, they're hiring on more people, they're expanding their pipeline, they're gearing up for clinical trials, they're buying their own equipment, and they need space for all of that. At some point, they get too big to pay by the bench, by the month at BioLabs.
Yeah.
And that's where Bridge Labs comes in, is that it's that what's next of lab space, that 4 to 8,000 square feet. We also have larger lab space for bigger companies that have graduated out of BioLabs and are still with us at Pegasus Park campus.
Yeah.
But the beauty of Bridge Labs and really how it fits into the whole story is that, like, it's great that if you have BioLabs, but if you don't have the what's next lab space for those companies, they're going to leave you anyway.
Yeah.
So it was a great strategic investment bringing in Bridge Labs exactly when.
Yeah.
when we
And
did.
it is, I mean, it's interesting because it's like, it is kind of unique for some of these really early stage companies. Like, they can't just go find any co-working space. Like, it would cost millions of dollars for a company to build out their own lab space with all the equipment that they need.
Exactly.
So I imagine it's like a huge value add, not only to the companies, but also like VCs who are interested in these early stage companies. Like, it's probably really valuable to see that, instead of having to spend their hard-earned capital on like 3 pieces of equipment, well, then they can spend it on the science and recruiting awesome talent and all of the other things that are required to get their work done. Can you talk about some examples of like what sorts of things are happening in these spaces? Like, what are some of the companies doing in BioLabs and Bridge Labs? What is going on in there?
Oh, we have so many exciting stories to tell, so many success stories. We've had high growth companies that started with us maybe with 4 people, moved up to 40 people, graduated into our Bridge Lab space. We've had spin outs of companies. We've had companies, one was from California, the other one was from SMU, just by virtue of working together in this co-working space, formed their own spin out. We have other companies now, one is from Baylor and the other one is an independent startup that started here in North Texas, and they're working together on a spin out. So we've had many, many success stories. We've had several grant winners. We've had a company, GenRab, Ben Greenberg, who I think was previously on the program. Their company won a golden ticket at BioLabs, which grants them 1 year of lab space and the support that BioLabs provides, and of course the equipment access. They went on to win another golden ticket that was a global competition. So they beat out Boston companies and San Francisco companies to win another year of lab space at BioLabs, and that year allowed them to, get next rounds of funding. We've got a great company, Atira. Russell Hayward was also on the podcast as well. His company went from idea to clinical trials in 2 years. And now they're in clinical trials in Australia for their first-in-class small molecule for cancer. So it's been very exciting to see what our companies have done.
Okay, so Gabby, you're talking about all these companies that are coming from other states, which is so exciting. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what they have found so appealing about Dallas? What is really drawing them here?
Yeah, I think what they're finding is this really strong, multifaceted ecosystem that checks all the boxes, right? We have a very strong trade org with BioNorth Texas that has consultants, advisors, financial advisors, former biotech CFOs. We've got a really strong access to capital. So not just on the venture capital side, because we do have sophisticated investors who have successfully invested in biotech, and those successes have reached $10 billion in exits in the past couple of years with Peloton and Reata. Caris Life Sciences just went public last year. So we have a lot of successes and investors that have been a part of that success. With Texas, we also have CPRIT, Cancer Prevention Research Institute of Texas. We also just passed DPRIT last year, which is the Dementia Prevention and Research Institute of Texas. Collectively, those are billions of dollars in state grant money that go towards early stage research into that translational aspect of how do we go from research to reality and into the clinic. They have relocation grants. So there have been companies that have moved back to Texas because of these relocation grants. We also have, I would say, community buy-in, right? Not just from leadership and philanthropy, but also like on the economic development side. Dallas Regional Chamber is a huge advocate for biotech in the North Texas region. So I think a lot of that goes into it, especially, and then there's the talent piece as well. North Texas or Dallas is the #1 tech workforce. That Site Selector magazine, I think, named North Texas as the best talent tech workforce. And that talent is coming out of our universities. So to give you an example of size for people who aren't from the region, UT Arlington, for example, student body of 40,000 students.
That is remarkable.
Presumably, 25% of those students are going to graduate every year. So that's 10,000 students. And if you think about maybe 20 to 30% of them are in some sort of tech, some sort of STEM, that's 2,000 to 3,000 graduates that are ready to enter the workforce in life sciences, biomedical engineering, AI. All of those things are present here in this region. So I think that people who come here see that we have all those elements, and we're also very friendly. We had a company that moved in from Boston that started last month, and their very first day in the lab, Lili, 3 other CEOs shook hands, introduced themselves. They were eating lunch with a different company in the afternoon. They were in the lab talking science to another company the next day. Immediately they were kind of brought in to the ecosystem.
Like feel a sense of community right away.
Exactly. So it's that sense of community, belonging, and just really shared vision for the region that we all have.
That's huge.
DFW is massive. There are 8 million people in North Texas, and that's more than the entire state of Massachusetts, right? So being able to collectively work together to push the common goal of building an ecosystem for our founders, that's what's the most important part.
It's a big coordinated effort.
It really is. It really is. And if you don't have that effort, and if you don't build that ecosystem, what ends up happening is that these incredible life-saving technologies die on the vine. BioLabs gives them the opportunity to move forward and hopefully make it out there to make a difference.
Yeah, make sure the science doesn't stay in the lab.
Exactly.
You get the research done, and then it's going to get to patients and solve real-world problems.
Exactly. And the other cool thing is that the graduate students and postdocs who see our industry growing, who participate in Nucleate, which is a student-run accelerator, or the Biotech Club or the Consulting Club, those students see what industry is all about, which is making them look at their research from more of a translational level of what am I doing right now that is going to make an impact, and how can I take my research and turn it into reality? So it's really inspiring. Our industry growth is inspiring a lot of new leaders.
Learning from Leaders, along with Southwestern Medical Foundation, is powered by generosity. Your support can help fuel breakthroughs in medical research, provide critical patient care, and support medical education. Additionally, it helps support the Learning from Leaders podcast and content like this. Every gift matters. Consider making a contribution today at swmedical.org/give. That's swmedical.org/give.
I think one of the things I'd love to get your thoughts on is you have gotten to see what leadership looks like in so many different ways, and how so many different models of how companies are making sure that their next generation of leaders are surrounded with the right support and the right resources and the right environment to be successful. I'd love to get your thoughts specifically on like, how do we make sure, we've seen some like increasingly so many incredible women who are running these companies. But how do we make sure, given that women in this industry are still pretty underrepresented, like how do we make sure that this next generation of companies and existing large companies are really like laying the groundwork to foster that growth and making sure that they're as welcoming and inclusive and supportive as an environment as possible?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny if you look at women in leadership and, in biotech in particular, but across all industries, women make up about half of the workforce. But if you look at those senior level leadership positions, in particular, C-suite, CEO especially, women make up maybe 30% of leadership roles. And again, when you get up to CEO, that number drops into like the lower teens percentage, right? So I think that early on, finding the women who want to start companies and fostering that growth, helping them to make those connections, getting them involved with Alloy Therapeutics, Biotech Startup Academy, bringing them into these networking events. Because I feel like all too often is that graduate students, postdocs, they're focusing so much on their research. And that's a great thing. But it means they don't get out of the lab, So being able to draw them out and introduce them to people and introduce them to female founders and female leaders, that's key. We have so many incredible female leaders in this ecosystem, right?
Totally.
We have Lyda, we have Nicole, we've got Kelly,
we have you,
Kathleen, thank you. We've got you, right? So the list goes on and on of these amazing female leaders that are building and fostering the ecosystem. But still, when I'm sitting in a room with our CEOs, I'm often the only woman in the room. And I think that's starting to change. So being able to show women at that level their trajectory and that pathway of you have a cool idea, BioLabs enables that cool idea.
Totally.
So try it. Yeah. And we have this ecosystem that's here to surround you and support you and help you every step of the way.
You're not at it alone.
You're not at it alone, very much, because it's a lonely job. From what I hear from CEOs, The Diary of a CEO, I love that podcast too.
It's a good podcast.
It's lonely, and not having to do it alone is great. Like there's often times where I see our CEOs gathered around the cold brew tap with their coffee and just sharing business development ideas and regulatory consultants and looking through each other's pitch deck and looking through each other's grant proposals, helping each other. So bringing those women into that environment is definitely something that we're working on doing. And then as biotech and life sciences starts to grow in North Texas, particularly in biomanufacturing and in workforce development, it's about finding those girls at an early stage and opening their eyes and doing that career discovery and showing them this pathway and
giving them great role models.
And we've brought, to that end, we've brought about 450 students through BioLabs, through hands-on activities to show them, hey, here's this whole cool industry that you can do.
That is amazing.
It's fun.
And what's like a typical, you have students come through, like what do they get to do in the lab?
So it's a little bit of everything right now because the lab is full, which is awesome. We don't have the open bench space to have students come in and do hands-on activities. But one of the things that we've done, we call it a day in the life of a scientist, where students come in, they read their protocol for the day, they read their safety information, and then they go into the lab and they do a hands-on experiment. For younger groups, maybe it's a strawberry DNA isolation, and they get to see this little nurdle of DNA at the end of a stick, right? It's tangible. Oh, wow, that's actually DNA. That's so cool. And then they can take that experiment home and show their families, and that's an impact multiplier that way. And for more advanced groups, we do double restriction enzyme digest. So you get your experiment started, You go eat lunch with your lab mates. We bring in pizza, load them up full of pizza, and typically have a panel of 3 or 4 scientists from all different walks of life to talk about how did you get into science? Where did you decide to go to school? More importantly, how did you pay for it, right? How did you get into biotech, and why did you choose the field that you did?
Yeah.
So those students are able to learn from those examples as well. And then they go back into the lab, finish up their experiment, and then do the data analysis at the end of the day. So it's very much a snapshot of what it's like to be a bench researcher.
Yeah.
And then other groups are, more on the business side. So we talk to them about here's the pathway from idea all the way to commercialization. And we, teach them about pitch decks and, hey, go back and into your little breakout room and y'all come up with an idea, almost like a hackathon. Come up with an idea that you want to solve, come up with a pitch deck, assign yourself roles as the CEO, and just put yourself into that mindset, right? So we've done a lot of those different kind of activities.
Yeah, and it's so powerful to be able to show these kids, like, there are a lot of different ways to be in the biotech and health and life sciences space. Like, you might want to be a bench scientist, and that's awesome. But also, like, all these companies, to your point, need a CEO or a CFO or someone who can run their marketing. Like,
Right.
there's a million ways to be part of this really exciting industry.
Yeah, exactly.
We've fortunately had a lot of our biotech community here on Learning from Leaders. Two of those people were Nicole Small and Matt Cromit, who we both have the pleasure of getting to work with.
Yep.
And during that session, we talked a lot about how kind of Pegasus Park and BioLabs have served as such instrumental ways to kind of bring together a lot of our higher ed institutions.
Yep.
And the fact that you have spinouts from SMU, you have spinouts from UT Arlington, you have Texas A&M training the workforce in Bridge Labs along with UT Arlington. Like, BioLabs does serve this unique role in kind of bringing together all these different pieces of the ecosystem, but not just like, let's bring everyone together and see what happens.
Yeah.
You are also very intentional around like finding really tangible ways for groups to collaborate. Can you talk about some of that? Like, and not just on the university side, like you're bringing in VCs to come do office hours with these companies. Like, talk about kind of how you're intentionally bringing together the right outside resources to get in front of these companies.
And, again, it's all about building up that ecosystem, right? If you're in, in the coasts, on the coasts, and you're in a coffee shop and you're an investor, you can hear a company right next to you talking about their biotech, or if you're, you seasoned veterans of CEOs who have been there and done that and are serial entrepreneurs building the next companies. It's all a flywheel.
Yeah.
And it comes from, again, creating those collisions and creating the environment where all of those collisions happen, where people want to be. BioLabs is a really cool space. We had one of our research scientists called BioLabs Pegasus Park the Google of biotech.
I love that.
It's great. We create that platform again where people want to be, opportunities for people to connect. Science is stressful enough, especially in startup world. So we try to make it fun. We have resident mixers. We have happy hours. We bring in investors, just trying to create those contacts and really introducing to people and making those contacts before they even know that they need them.
Totally.
And so it's really, Pegasus Park, I think, in that way has become kind of the connective tissue of the ecosystem.
Okay, so Gabby, you have this experience of kind of bringing together all of these pieces to help BioLabs resident companies solve lots of different problems. Can you talk about what you are intentionally doing to help solve those problems?
Sure. So I think fundamentally the biggest problem that BioLabs solves is not needing like large investments early on, right? Again, these companies are very fragile. They're starting out with an idea that is extremely risky. Not having to go out and raise $4 to $5 million to fully equip a lab space to be able to chase those questions.
Yeah.
That's absolutely one of the problems. And the other thing with the shared equipment, and this is, more nuanced that people don't think about, is with shared equipment, what that means is that researchers don't have to decide between an experiment with a piece of equipment that would, for a confocal microscope, for example, is the price of like an entire company's annual budget, right? Our companies no longer have to make that decision between reagents and buying tips versus doing that fundamental experiment that's going to help them de-risk their science more.
And for any listeners who may not be aware of what a confocal microscope is, can you give like the one sentence on what that does?
Sure. It's a microscope that helps you look basically through all levels of a cell or a specimen. A lot of times, there's fluorescence tags involved. So if you want to, you want to know where a particular protein is in a cell, you can tag it with a fluorescent molecule and turn a light on and see where exactly it's located within a cell at like kind of all focal planes.
Yeah, that is very cool.
Yeah, and it's a cool piece of equipment. So, we have people who are doing, imaging research and they're like, oh man, it would be cool if you have a confocal microscope. And it's like, well, why walk this way? So,
yeah. Well, I feel very lucky to have gotten your tour, Gabby, of like what every piece of equipment does. Being a non-scientist myself, it is so much fun to walk through that space and learn like what each piece of equipment is really doing for each of these companies.
Yeah.
It's just incredible to see the work that's going on in the space.
Yeah, and it's a fun space. And the other, important thing about BioLabs is that all of our team, we're all nerdy scientists. We have bioengineers and geneticists and biochemists, so we can speak that language to our companies, right? So one, we can help them solve problems when they come up and say, oh, the plate reader isn't loading right, or they can even like come to us and, hey, my PCR isn't working, and so we can listen to them. Our company was made by scientists and entrepreneurs for scientists and entrepreneurs. So it really creates that close dynamic between our team and our researchers.
Yeah. And you all at BioLabs have a whole global network, right? So can you talk a little bit about how you kind of collectively, like how are you collaborating with maybe the BioLabs in Boston or in I think you have one in Paris or New Haven.
Yeah, we do.
Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, we do.
The network.
So it is a global network. Started in the Boston, Cambridge area in 2010. And since then, we've expanded to, I think it's like 15 locations globally now. Cambridge, Princeton, Tufts, NYU, Philly, Yale, Research Triangle Park, Vermont, LA, San Diego, Paris, Heidelberg, collaborations in Japan. It's definitely this very diverse network. But we're also very close. All of the site heads are on a call together weekly. So if anyone has a particular problem that their companies are trying to solve, we can share knowledge that way.
What are some of the early mistakes that you see some companies making that you try to kind of help companies or resident companies get ahead of?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, one of those fundamental mistakes is scaling too quickly, right? You don't necessarily need to buy that $400,000 piece of equipment just yet. So that, and I think, bringing in the right advisors, starting with the end in mind, being very intentional with experiments. In academics, when something doesn't work, you're chasing, well, why didn't it work, right? You're chasing sometimes the more fundamental aspects of science, whereas in biotech and in industry, your focus needs to be on those milestone experiments and on those important results, basically, that are going to de-risk their science. So I think overbuilding, over-leveraging too quickly on space and on equipment, and just not having focus on exactly what it is that you're trying to push forward, be it a project or, do I want to be a platform technology, or do I want to have a, primary asset? So being able to focus early is key.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think, kind of looking forward with the work in this broader ecosystem? Like, we've seen some incredible success stories, whether it's companies raising really successful rounds or, UT Southwestern winning some really, really significant federal grants, like things like that. We've seen so much progress with relocations.
Yep.
What do you think is kind of next on the docket to make sure, like gaps that we need to fill to make sure that this ecosystem continues to expand successfully?
Great question. I would say that one of the gaps is that early stage funding. Again, biotechs at their early stage, it's very risky. So a lot of that gap is filled by grant funding, but at the same time, you do have seed funding that is important for those companies. And we're seeing a lot more of that, right? We're seeing investors where previously they would fly over or have a layover in DFW are now wanting to take time out and come to Pegasus Park and talk with our companies. So we're seeing a lot more that way. And we're getting a lot more traction with professors and with the graduate students and the postdocs, right? They're the ones that actually go out and start the company. So we have also other programs in the ecosystem, like the Biotech Startup Academy with Alloy Therapeutics that is working on training that next generation of biotech CEOs and operators. So I think we're starting to see that flywheel kickstart.
Totally.
Yeah.
Could you talk about how the broader industry, kind of nationally, globally, is impacting what's going on here in Dallas?
I can. So, and you're gonna think that this is like a super canned answer and cliche, but AI is doing a lot for biotech. It's not replacing the scientists at all, but it is making the science smarter. And what that means is that AI is helping us identify red flags sooner in research, helping us design better clinical trials that actually answer the question. There have been multiple times, even recently, that drugs have not been approved because of poor clinical trial design. So AI is helping us in that way. And it's helping us, I would say it's not de-risking the science all the way, because obviously there is still that risk, but it's helping us learn more from our mistakes and from our failures. And the other thing that leads into is high throughput science and automation. So instead of historically, if you've got a library of 10,000 compounds that you want to test against a particular rare disease or enzyme that you want to inhibit, you're doing all that by hand. And now we have automation, so you can screen those 10,000 compounds in maybe a couple of days. So that makes that piece of equipment another impact multiplier, so your scientists can do a lot more with a lot less.
It's huge.
Yeah, which means that, single person companies, or if it's just you and your research senior researcher, you can have more shots on goal. So it's really making a huge impact for the industry.
So switching gears for just a minute, because this is a podcast about leadership, can you talk about, of course, every great leader as yourself has had incredible mentors in their life. Can you talk about a mentor that has really impacted you or helped shape your view on leadership?
I have been very fortunate to have several mentors throughout my career in multiple aspects, right? My professor, Rai Young, in graduate school was a fantastic mentor, and he knew individually what each of his graduate students needed as far as how they were better able to be successful, right? Some people needed to be prodded and encouraged. Some people were more, I need to learn how to fall flat on my face and learn from that mistake, and then I'll be better next time, right? That was more my style. So I think through his mentorship and his example as a leader taught me that everybody has a different style that they want to be led and mentored, right? So, with my team, for example, right? So having conversations with them of, help me help you. How can I help you, be the best you in the lab space? So I learned a lot from that. I've also had other mentors, both on the hands-on science who kind of, trained me on here's how you think about product development and here's, how you think about commercialization. And then I've also had other champions, I would say. So having a mentor is one thing, and having that go-to person who is where you want to be that can help coach you through those next steps and through those trials and help you learn from your mistakes and your failures. But then there's also that champion who speaks for you when you're not in the room. I had a couple of great champions in my previous role. Trudy Van Horn, who is an incredible leader in IT here in DFW, Christy Bonner, and they were people who saw that leadership in me before I even did. And they were the ones who really encouraged me. But part of having a mentor, like they don't come after you, right? And they don't fall from the sky. So for anyone who is looking for that mentor and looking for that champion, you have to go out and find them. You have to network, you have to go to events, because you seek them out, and they've been incredibly helpful for me.
Yeah. And when you were talking to mentees of yours, or when you're thinking about, like people out there who are really interested in the space or want to start a business or want to get into biotech, what is your advice for them? Like, what do you hope to impart on them?
Oh, wow. Biggest piece of advice, again, I think network.
Yeah.
You can network and interact with people who are where you currently are, like other graduate students. And then you can also network again with people who are where you want to be. So if you're thinking that you want to start a company, go talk to a CEO. If you're thinking that you want to go into VC, talk to someone in venture, right?
Yeah. So before we close, we have a quick rapid fire round for you.
Okay.
So this is just like quick first thing that comes to mind. Okay, the first question is, what is your go-to work soundtrack?
So it depends on what I'm doing.
Okay.
If I'm doing, I'm very lyrical in that I sing along to songs.
Of course.
So if I'm singing along, I can't do that and focus on something important at the same time. So if I'm, working through something that's a little bit more casual, I'll listen to, whatever music I want. But if it's something where I really have to sit and focus, numbers, budgeting, spreadsheets, all of that kind of stuff, sometimes it's heavy metal, sometimes it's Bollywood because I don't understand what they're saying, so I can't sing along. Other times it's classical. So it really just depends on what I'm working on and what my vibe is that day.
Okay. And then like the first part of that, if you're just like, you don't need to be in a spreadsheet or something, like what is like your go-to song?
I listen to all types of music, and I know that's cliche. Everyone's like, oh, I'm eclectic. I listen to everything. I do for the most part.
I can see that for you.
Yeah.
Knowing you, I can totally see that for you.
Right now I'm really in an 80s vibe.
Okay.
Right? So like Bruce Springsteen and Van Halen and Flock of Seagulls and Tears for Fears. Like I am that person who has my radio on full blast driving down the highway with the windows down. So yeah.
Okay, so outside of biotech, what is a topic or a hobby that you love to nerd out on?
I, again, as a science nerd, I do nerd out on everything. So like, YouTube videos like, Veritasium or that talk about physics, and Astrum that talk about astronomy, right? So I love all of that kind of stuff. I also, just like to hang out with my kiddo and make bracelets. So a little bit of everything.
Love that. What is the best perk about working at BioLabs?
Other than working with the people that I work with and the people who I work for, they really make the space what it is. Without our people, that space is just a lab space and it's just a building. So it's the people that make it a community. Other than that, we have a really cool Bevy bubbly water machine.
It's excellent.
It really is. So I love having my Topo Chico and LaCroix on tap. It's great.
Yeah. Okay, if you could instantly master one hobby or skill, what would it be?
I would love to be some languages. I would love to be a polyglot and be able to speak, 5 to 6 different languages, because I feel like speaking someone's language figuratively and literally, that's the ultimate connector.
Okay, what is your comfort food after a long day?
My Grammy's macaroni salad.
That sounds
I
delicious.
still make it to this day.
Okay, so you got the recipe.
Oh yeah,
That's good.
absolutely.
It's not like a, long-standing family secret or something
No,
like that.
and
Okay,
the
that's
beauty
good.
of it is that it's written in her handwriting.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, what is a fun fact about you that might surprise your coworkers?
My coworkers know a lot about me, but I think like the fun fact that would surprise other people. I have a blue belt in Krav Maga.
What?
I do, yeah. So
Gabby, we've been working together for 4 years, and I did not know this.
yeah. My family and I train a couple nights a week, and then I've also done Taekwondo, so brown belt in Taekwondo,
That's
Aikido
amazing.
training, and jujitsu.
How did you get into it?
My dad. Yeah, I started going with my dad at a very young age, like 10, 11. And it teaches you, obviously, not just the self-defense aspect, but it also teaches you confidence, knowing that you can go out into the world and literally face anything.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, what show are you currently binge watching?
Not really binge watching anything, but
Or slow watching?
I will tell you, I'm a junkie for period/historical
Okay.
dramas, especially if it's historically accurate.
Yeah.
I love seeing and getting a feel for what life was like in the 1600s and the 1800s. So,
Is there one that you're loving right now?
I watched Poldark, which is a great show. I like Downton Abbey. I like Victoria. So like anything, especially British history too. Like I'm into all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, my last question for you is, what is one meme you wish would go away in 2026?
I wouldn't necessarily say one particular meme,
Okay.
but this whole idea of burnout culture,
Yes.
of stress
Mhm.
being a badge of courage and a badge of honor, right? These memes of, surviving on coffee and you can sleep when you're dead and me after
Yeah.
a long week and you're all frazzled, or, this whole idea of hustle culture, right? We look at those things and we laugh at them and we relate to them.
Mhm.
And that's the sad part, right?
Yeah.
This whole idea of being overstressed and that being okay is normalized instead of balance
Yes.
and wellness.
Yes. And finding like ways to have longevity with enthusiasm for
Exactly.
your work and all those things.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you get to do very cool work.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, well, Gabby, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for all of the work that you're doing for BioLabs, for your companies, for the region. It does not go unnoticed. So much of the growth of this industry over the last few years has been in thanks to you. So thank you for all that you are doing for our community. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us and learning from leaders. We'll have some links in the description where you can find out more about BioLabs at Pegasus Park. And be sure to follow for more conversations with inspiring voices shaping our community.
Thanks for listening to Learning from Leaders. If you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to subscribe now for monthly episode drops so that you can continue to learn from experienced business and community leaders to help you drive meaningful change in your community.